up, everyone? This is DR with the WoW Breakdown 101, and do I have a treat for you on our next installment of Raid Battles of World of Warcraft Histories, where I'm going to be pitting some of the toughest bosses from each expansion against each other to decide which boss was actually the toughest boss during raid content. So, who actually is going to come out on top? Will those vanilla raiding prove to be the pinnacle of raid difficulty, or will BC reign supreme in all things, including toughest raid bosses? Will all those Wrath Baby and current raiding bosses prove to be the paperweight loot dropping pushovers that so many claim the newer raid bosses to be? Well, this is how we're going to find out, my friends. Each battle will be a 7-round fight to judge the winner. In the first round, we will go over the strats to down the boss and determine which strat was the hardest to determine the winner of that round. Round 2 will be an individual damage abilities that the boss does, and whichever boss's individual damage ability poses the most threat will win in that round. The third round will be the raid-wide damaging abilities that pose the largest threat to killing your raid. The fourth round will be which boss posed the hardest job for the DPS role. The fifth round will go to whichever boss was hardest on the tank row. The sixth round will go to whichever boss was harder on the heals rows. And the seventh and final round will be which boss's mechanics was the most difficult of raids to learn and get their heads around. At the end of the fight, the boss with the most rounds will be declared the winner. Now, let's get to know the two contenders of this fight, as they are old gods, and their look and feel is very similar. Coming in the vanilla corner is Cthulhu. Cthulhu has been argued as one of the hardest pre-nerf bosses ever and being unkillable in its original state. No guilds in the world managed to kill him before he was hotfixed. That's right, there was actually no nerf as the boss was bugged. There was even talk that Blizzard left Cthulhu in this state to keep the world top guilds busy until Naxx came out. However, I have a different theory. This was an early point in Blizzard's World of Warcraft career, so I don't think they had the manpower, resources, and technology at that time to perform a hotfix with ease, which is what left this boss in its bugged, unkillable state for so long, making it a legend that has stood the test of time. Let's make no mistake about it, even after the fixed version of this fight was still a very tough one, and the only reason the guilds killed it so fast after the hotfix was because they had months to practice the fight. Now, coming in the Wrath of the Lich King corner is Yogg Saron. This was the final boss in one of the most legendary raids in World of Warcraft history, and arguably one of the hardest raids, as it introduced the first time in World of Warcraft history hard modes to some of the encounters, which was a stepping stone for heroic difficulty. We will be looking at Yogg Saron in hard mode without any of the helpers for this fight. Let's get straight into the action as round 1 is now underway. Cthulhu is sizing up his opponent with his strat, which during content was no doubt the most complex and hardest strategy that anyone in World of Warcraft had seen up to that point. Just entering the room was a chore, as the best strategy was to send in players with the highest nature resist into the room ahead of everyone else. Everyone then had to ensure that they were spread at least 10 yards apart, which in itself may not seem like a hard task. However, when you take into consideration that 40 raiders would have to position, and that, my friend, is over a 400-yard span that the raid had to be spread out for. For those who was not in vanilla at the time, just think about Undasta, the world boss, if you have ever participated in that kill. How many times did you see people dropping dead because they was closer than 3 yards to the next person, when this ability only hit a maximum of 20 people, and it was taking out about 15 people almost every time it cast? Death Beam mechanic making one of its first appearances in a big way, and once it's over, your raid would have to reposition. You had claw tentacles and giant claw tentacles that had to be DPS down ASAP, and not to mention the giant claws had to be tanked. Then during phase 2, every 10 seconds a tentacle would get hungry and eat one of your raid members, throwing them into Cthulhu's stomach. Once you had been swallowed up by Cthulhu, you had to get to the platform and make your way out, DPS the tentacle in Cthulhu's stomach so that it could be damaged once again on the outside. Once the tentacles in his stomach were dead, he reached a weakened phase, which the raid on the outside would blow up the boss. You would have to repeat this twice during the second phase to finish off the boss. Yogg Saron is staring his opponent down as he is combating his strategy, which actually has drove more people insane than a 3-week vacation with their in-laws. Sanity is the core part of Yogg Saron's strategy, and staying sane is not an easy task. Even level 90 toons will hit a brick wall against this level 80 boss if they do not know the strategy. Yogg Saron was a 3-phase encounter, and during phase 1, the strat was to have one of the tanks in the center of the room with around 4 ranged members and a heals at max range of the tank. to remain safe from the clouds. The off tank would bring the guardians to the tank in the center of the room so that he can taunt them. This was a common strat used in 25 man. During phase 2, you had tentacles to deal with just as you did with Cthulhu, and you had to go inside of Yogg Saron's brain, which would drive you insane fast if you was not careful. The different abilities that the tentacles had, along with keeping your sanity, was a pain during this part of the fight. The last phase was the head of the beast and required the raid to begin its burn phase to kill the boss before he kills them. Oh, this is a very exciting first round and a tight one, as both bosses have strategies that are new, refreshing encounter designs to be dealt with. However, it does look like the complex strategy jump of Cthulhu is reigning over Yogg, as yes, Yogg retreats, leaving the winner of this round to Cthulhu. We are back into round 2 with tentacles flying everywhere, and it is actually hard to tell where Cthulhu's tentacles begin and Yogg Saron's ends. This round is coming down to the most dangerous single target abilities that the boss poses, with Cthulhu coming out with 2 such abilities. The first ability is going to be Dark Glare, which is a red beam of death that circles around the room. If you come in contact with this beam, you can kiss your "Hello, my darling" goodbye, as you took 43,750 to 56,250 shadow damage. Holy shit, talk about your overkill. The ability done more than 10 times the damage of most raiders' life during content. This ability only makes it because of its sheer amount of overkill, as you would have to really derp to get hit by this during the fixed encounter. The other ability came from the giant claw tentacles, as it would be summoned at a random person's feet, and if they were still there when the tentacle was emerged, it would do 3,000 to 4,000 damage, nearly one-shotting anyone that was hit by this. Yogg Saron is cursing his way into the round with his first ability, Curse of Doom, which is a debuff that inflicts 20,000 shadow damage after 12 seconds if it was not dispelled. This ability poses no threat if handled correctly, just as a beam of death. However, if not, then you guessed it, people were getting one-shot by this frequently. Digging deep into his bag of tricks, Yogg Saron summons Immortal Guardians, which have to be picked up by the tanks ASAP, along with being DPS down very fast, as they do more damage the higher their life was. At full life, they would hit a well-geared tank for around 25k. If these was not dealt with ASAP and your raid tunnel visions the boss trying to get that kill, then Immortals would absolutely start wrecking your guild, one-shotting everyone at full life and two-shotting your tanks. What a thrilling fight we have so far, as yet again another tight round. The sheer overkill of Cthulhu's Death Beam ability needs to be noted here. However, it looks like Yogg Saron's single target abilities pose the most danger to the raid, as the Immortal Guardians, along with other mechanics, made for an insane finish to the fight in phase 3. Yogg Saron has just tied this bout up 1 round to 1 as we head into round 3. During vanilla, very few raid-wide damage abilities were in place that was very dangerous to the raid, and Cthulhu is coming out with a single target ability called Eye Beam, an ability that jumped from raid member to raid member, and if the raid was not spread out correctly, could lead up to 40-man raids wiping instantly as they came into the room not being positioned correctly. How funny it must have been to see those raiders going in for the first time all mounted up and dropping dead before they can even get off their mounts, sitting scratching their head as Yogg is now trying to come back with a raid-wide damage ability to knock Cthulhu dead in his eye. Cthulhu has a gut feeling that this round is going in his favor, as the Mount of Yogg Saron is coming out with Dark Volley that inflicts 8,500 to 11,000 shadow damage to the entire raid and leaves a debuff that reduces the healing by 25% for 10 seconds. But wait a minute, you may be saying. Yogg Saron has a 15-minute cast time from the start of the fight, which wipes the entire raid, called Extinguish All Life. However, we are not allowing any hard rage mechanics or abilities into this round. Soft and rages are fine. Wait a minute, what is going on here? Are we coming down to the line yet again in this round, as it looks like Cthulhu has pulled off this round, as both abilities can be nullified if handled correctly. However, if Cthulhu's was handled incorrectly, then it was far more deadly than Yogg Saron's. This fight so far has been the toughest yet to judge, as we come into the 4th round with Cthulhu leading 2 rounds to Yogg Saron's 1 round. Cthulhu is putting on one hell of a round in the DPS difficulty round, as this fight was the most punishing DPS race of its time, not to mention one of the most complicated strategies that many DPS have ever seen, leaving most DPS doing something they have never done before, having multiple jobs or tasks to do in an encounter. Most DPS had one task to deal with, but in this encounter they had multiple target priorities, Death Beam, Stomach Phase with stacking dots placed on them that can even kill a level 90 toon if they don't get out of the stomach fast enough. However, Yogg Saron is not phased in the least, as DPS in this fight was so confused at points, it drove them insane. Raid leads were pulling their hair out as DPS was fucking up on kill order, becoming mind controlled, not getting together on linked beams, dying in the brain. This fight was one of the most grueling fights for individual responsibility. I am telling you, this one is going to be a hard one for the judges. Oh shit. Wait a minute, that's me. I am the judge. This is crazy hard to decide, but with the sheer difficulty of this boss posed to the DPS during content, helped shape raid encounters and mechanics better for the future, as bosses started to become more and more complicated and more mechanics thrown in. Cthulhu will take this round and is now up 3 rounds to 1. Yogg Saron is in serious trouble, and from the looks of it, he is being dominated. However, this fight has been so very close every round that I'm starting to go insane myself. Round number 5 is underway as Cthulhu still looking strong as he is forcing tanks to push their limits. This fight would be considered easier than the hardest tank boss in this raid. However, if the tanks did not pick up the giant tentacles, then people would start dying fast. Oh, wait a minute! It looks like, yes, Yogg Saron has tricked his way into this round, destroying Cthulhu in the most lopsided round of the fight so far. Yogg Saron had punishing abilities in various forms from the tanks that they had to deal with, and coming down to the wire with the immortals that would one-shot people at full life, the tanks had to be on their toes to ensure that every immortal was picked up, along with surviving the first few attacks from each one. Not to mention, tanks had to deal with sanity as well. As a much-needed round goes to Yogg Saron, we are now at 3 rounds for Cthulhu and 2 rounds for Yogg Saron. And Cthulhu in this round, in round number 6, putting Yogg Saron out of range for a comeback. Only time will tell, as the difficulty for this fight for the healers came in the form of some healers playing a hybrid role in DPS and tentacles when they came out, and healing as little as possible in phase 1 to keep up on mana, along with taking out tentacles ASAP. The faster the tentacles died, the less healing was required, so that meant that dealing damage to the tentacles was far more effective than healing for the most part. Phase 2 had so much damage going out that healers were constantly going trying to keep the raid alive. Most guilds that downed Cthulhu did so with under half of their raid left alive, which was a very stressful point for healers down in this encounter. Yet another good round as Yogg Saron is on the verge of losing this fight, but it seems unfazed in the least. Confident in his difficulty that Yogg Saron is placed on the healers, and the HPS requirement did ramp up the longer the fight went on. The amount of moving dispels that had to be dealt with perfect, or people would start dying, and the mechanics that healers had to deal with was no laughing matter. Unlike Cthulhu, you cannot have nearly 50% of your raid dead by the end of the encounter, which put more stress on the heals, and I'm giving this round to Yogg Saron. We have a fight on our hands now, ladies and gentlemen. These 2 old gods of World of Warcraft are tearing each other tentacle from tentacle. Cthulhu has a major case of red eye, and I think they may have drops for that. And Yogg Saron needs to take his medicine as we hit this last round. Now, which boss had the most difficult raid mechanics for guilds to get their head around during content? Yet again, this is going to be another tough one to decide, my friends, as both of these bosses during content and even after content have mechanics to this day that people struggle with when they go back to solo this content. You have Cthulhu, who was way ahead of his time during vanilla, and probably one of the reasons he was a broken fight. And you have Yogg Saron, who was the pinnacle of hardcore raiding that brought in the heroic mode difficulty shortly after his demise. This is coming down to the wire as it should be. These bosses are both legend and the toughest decision that is going to be made in all of this series. The winner of the final round with the most difficult raid mechanics and the winner of this fight 4 rounds to 3 is Yogg Saron! Well, what a comeback, and I knew this was going to be the closest and toughest decision I was going to have to make in this series, and that is the reason I got it out of the way so fast, to be honest. Trust me, guys, this was not an easy decision to be made, and don't think that I'm hating on vanilla raiding, as there was only a few bosses in all of World of Warcraft that would even be in the same league as Cthulhu. If you disagree with me, and there will be many of you that will, on who should have won this battle, then leave it in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, share, and subscribe to help me put out more content for you guys. Have suggestions for future raid battles you would like to see, then leave them in the comments section below, or email me at thewowbreakdown@gmail.com, and see you again next time, guys.